And I asked James how much of the success of Superman is determining what's going to come after, because they've announced a lot of projects. They've greenlit other things. And James had a very interesting and honest answer. BD here, welcome back to the YouTube channel. And in this video, we are talking about my trip to the set of Superman. This photo proves I was there and that at one point in my life, I thought that mustache was a good idea. It was a choice. It was a choice. I admit it was a choice. But more importantly, I got to talk with DC Studios co-CEO James Gunn, the writer and director of Superman himself, about the relationships that drive this movie, the characters we're going to meet, and how it all sets up the new DC universe going forward. So stay tuned to the end of the video because it all is going to get you really excited when you hear the whole thing. Some of this might be considered mild spoilers for things like how the movie starts or the trajectory it puts the characters on, but it all came from James Gunn himself, and that guy hates spoilers, so I think it's all pretty safe to hear and it won't ruin your experience with the movie at all. So if you don't mind, please hit the thumbs up, continue to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for the support that's gotten me to this point, and let's jump in. First of all, Superman is going to take flight immediately in this movie. Like, first scene, James Gunn wanted to come out swinging. Here's what Gunn had to say about opening the movie. It was really about putting us in the middle of the action from the beginning. We just start in the middle of the action. Superman's already existing. Lois and Clark already know each other. Lex hates Superman's guts from the beginning, although they don't know each other personally. So we start right in the middle of the action. It takes place over a short amount of time. This immediately makes me think of the All-Star Superman comic, which James Gunn has not been shy about saying inspired this movie. That comic starts with Superman returning from a trip to the sun that really messes with his mortality and sets the whole story in motion, but really opens with a fight right in front of the Daily Planet on the streets of Metropolis with Samson and Atlas. And I do think we're going to see some of that epic comic book action translated to the big screen, because James Gunn said things like he took the way Superman fights on the ground just as seriously as the way Superman fights in the air, and he wanted to make them consistent, and he was very thorough in developing that. Here's what he had to say. We took a lot from films like Top Gun Maverick, which we are shooting flying things. We shoot a lot of our action with actual drones in and around Superman and the people he's flying with, engineer, whoever else that he's fighting up in the air. I've gotten even more into finding new stuff on the set and new moments and exploring that stuff, finding magic where it is. After Gunn's recent work, especially that action scene in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the continuous shot, you know the one, I'm really excited to see what he did with this drone technology, with Superman's flight, with all these other characters from the DC universe that he's throwing into this movie for the first time. Now that said, the tone and inspiration does go much further than Top Gun Maverick. Actually, it extends to Game of Thrones too. James Gunn said, "It's something different than I've ever done before, but how can I then translate that to you guys on the outside? Because I start with a place that's very hopeful, fun, but incredibly serious all at the same time. It's humorous, but it's certainly not as comic or as comedy as either Suicide Squad or Guardians. There's plenty of humor in it, but it's trying to create something that is grounded, but also it's an incredibly fanciful world. It's fantasy. It's taking from other things like Game of Thrones, where it's this universe where superheroes actually exist. What are they like? There's a magic there that's undeniable. And everyone knows James Gunn likes to set the tone through a soundtrack. He loves a good needle drop, and he's very, very good at them. This time around, it's going to be a score that drives the tone in the scenes, more so than a soundtrack of songs that you might have already been familiar with. There's nods to Williams, and then also John Murphy's created this incredible, beautiful score, Gunn said. But the one thing is it is a score. It's not a soundtrack, so it's not about the songs. There's a few songs in it, and of course I chose those songs beforehand, but it isn't like any of my previous movies really in terms of the score is what drives it. It's a much, much more of a score film. We got a taste of the score in that motion poster that Gunn and DC Studios released on Monday, and for me, I really liked that. I had like touches of John Williams, but also kind of Hans Zimmer's Man of Steel flight theme kind of all flying around in there, and I really dug it, and I cannot wait to hear more when the movie's score arrives. Remember when we weren't sure if Superman was going to wear trunks in this movie, and Peter and James and everybody at DC Studios was saying like, we don't know yet. Well, there was actually a lot of debate internally about whether or not this Superman would wear trunks, and it was David Corenswet, Superman himself, who came up with the answer to that, and this is really cool. James explained it as, David said something to me that really affected me. We were trying on all these different versions, and we screen tested with trunks and no trunks, and one of the things David said is that Superman wants kids to not be afraid of him. He's an alien. He's got these incredible powers. He shoots beams out of his eyes, can blow a truck over. He's incredibly powerful, could be considered a scary individual, and wants people to like him. He wants to be a symbol of hope and positivity. So he dresses like a professional wrestler. He dresses in a way that makes people unafraid of him. That shows that. And I was like, that really clicked for me. I think it is awesome that David Corenswet cares so much about the character that he came up with that himself, and the fact that James Gunn listened to him just explains why all these casts just love working with this guy. Have you ever heard somebody had a bad experience with him after making a movie recently? I can't say that I have. Now, while some people might be afraid of Superman because of how powerful he is if he wasn't wearing trunks, one person who is definitely not afraid of him is Lois Lane. James said, "I don't think it's something we've ever seen in any superhero movie ever," while talking about Clark and Lois's relationship. "It's a complicated relationship, and we really get into it, and there's long scenes that are about their relationship and the way they relate and what it would be like for a person who's this incredibly intelligent, strong-headed, stubborn, skeptical journalist to have a relationship with someone who can lift a skyscraper." The All-Star Superman comic really does have a lot of really great moments with Superman and Lois Lane. I mean, it's her birthday. He gives her powers like his own for her birthday. They get to go to the moon and kiss in the sky and all this stuff. And it seems like we're going to see some of that in this movie, though I'm not sure if Lois knows who Superman is at the start of the film. James did say Lois knows who Superman is, but I'm not sure if he meant like she knows Superman's secret identity or she knows of Superman because the whole world does. Expanding on it further, he said the only people that know Clark/Superman are his mom and dad and a few others, and those are very different things. It says in my script on the second page, I don't believe in those other things. I don't think anybody knows Superman unless they know both of him. And when they know both of him, they know the real guy, and that means not too many people. And to me, right out of the gate, that tells an interesting story for Clark, who's not only preserving his secret identity, but he's trying to fit in a world that doesn't really even know who he is, and sometimes might reject him and might accept him, and he's just going to wrestle with all that. It's going to be really interesting. In fact, the Lois and Clark/Superman casting is what James Gunn said was the most important part and the part he was a little bit nervous about, but he did something new, and he found it pretty quickly as a result. Gunn said, "We did something that I didn't do with Guardians, which is cast the two leads together, and they all came in, and we had this 15-minute long scene that they have to act together and talk and discuss and just communicate. And I mixed and matched all the different couples, and it was simple magic when the two of them came up. I gotta say, it's one of my greatest moments in filmmaking." Now, of course, a lot of us are excited to see how Superman launches the DC Universe with James Gunn at the helm creatively. We have Creature Commandos releasing episodes. It's technically the first thing of this new DC Universe, but Creature Commandos feels kind of like an appetizer with Superman being the main course. But when asked about this, James Gunn said it does zero to set up future movies and shows, and then he kind of walked it back and thought that through and gave a little bit more of an answer, so this is what he had to say. "I mean, maybe two little things, two moments, but basically if something's there just to set up something else, fuck it. I even say that, and for all I know, those things can be cut by the time we get to the editing room because something has to exist for this movie, and if that works in tandem with setting up characters that exist in other media, then that's great. If this sets up stuff in Peacemaker, which it does, then that's great. But that is never, ever, ever with me going to be something that I'm going to sacrifice even a moment or a beat in a story for, especially a movie." Prime example of things that are connecting is Frank Grillo's Rick Flag is already debuting in Creature Commandos. He's going to be in Superman, and then he's going on to Peacemaker, so that right there might be what James Gunn was referencing in that quote. But of course, to get to the rest of the DC Universe, this Superman movie has to get us hooked and get audiences to theaters. And I asked James how much of the success of Superman is determining what's going to come after, because they've announced a lot of projects. They've greenlit other things. And James had a very interesting and honest answer. He said, "We're not going to keep making movies. All of this. We have only one proven entity, which is Peacemaker, because it was a really big show, and we're coming back with Peacemaker, and it's so incredibly different from this movie, but it's within the same universe. And that's what we kind of do, what they're doing. With Lanterns, it's so different than what we're doing with both of these shows." So it's clear James is trying to introduce a whole plethora of tones, of characters, of rosters, of all sorts of things in this DC universe, and Superman is the big first key part. So Superman is not going to go out of its way to set up the future of the DC universe. It's going to introduce us to major core characters that are going to be pillars in this franchise going forward, and he didn't really want to spoil it more than that. So Superman hits in July of 2025. There's going to be a lot more Superman and DC stuff on this channel, and it's not going to take very long for you to get it, and I'm very excited for you to all see it with me. Stay tuned on Thursday, because we're going to be talking about that trailer on Phase Hero. Let me know what questions you have about this interview with James Gunn from my time on set with Superman. It was so cool. I know how lucky I am to be doing stuff like this, and I appreciate every single one of you who gets excited about it, who subscribes to the channel and hits the thumbs up. So please continue doing that. Hit subscribe, hit thumbs up, drop a comment, let me know what you want to talk about, and I'll be as active as I can for as long as I can in that comment section without losing my mind. I'm BD. I'll see you in the next video.